Hello YouTubers, in this video we're going to be changing the brakes on my 2009 9.3 Aero cross-wheel drive. The previous owner had already put on new rotors. Those are fine. I'm not going to be doing rotors in this video, but all it is a bolt and pull it off. Because we're already going to get into taking the caliper bracket off. So as part of this job, I'm not just going to change the brake pads all the way around. I'm going to paint the calipers silver because that looks horrendous. Yeah, not a fan of that look. Not a fan of these brakes. It would be better if they were Brembos. If you saw my Camaro videos, those look good. But just going to paint these silver because I want it to look stock. I want it to look how it came. I thought about putting on red caliper or painting the red calipers, painting the calipers red, but decided against it because it's already a red car. Flashy enough. I think silver brakes are going to be perfectly fine for this car. Plus, it's not like those are big brakes. They're big brake calipers, don't get me wrong, bigger than those, but I still don't want to call attention to them. So when you look in there, I don't want you to see little brakes with a little caliper. So I don't want to make these red and you draw your eye to them and then you notice, hey, they're red and they're small. That's fine for some people. For me, I don't like that look. I'd rather either paint them black or just paint them back how they came from the factory. So that's what's going to be done. So let's jump into the parts we're going to use to paint the calipers and to change the pads. Rotors. Wanted to preempt the video here and cover rotors because the rotor size on your car will determine what brake pad do you need. And to me, there appear to be like three different versions, three different brake rotor sizes. The ones that are on my car were 12 and 5/16, which equated to the 314 millimeter rotor. So when you go inside, go look online for your brake parts, like I did for my brake pads, it said for Y3S3F sedan with 314 millimeter rotor. That's important. That tells me that pad was for that rotor. If you go online and you look for your pads, make sure you know your rotor size first. And that's the whole point of this part of the video is collect your information now, then go buy your parts. Understand your rotor size. That will tell you what you need for rotors, and it will tell you what you need for brake pads. So what we have here are the brake pads from Brembo. They are ceramic because I don't like dust. The previous owner had, those must be semi-metallics because the back gets black, but the front stays clean. So the fronts must already have ceramic pads on them, and we're gonna put them back on there, but new ones, of course. And we're gonna do the same thing with the rears, ceramic brake pads on the back, both Brembos. I'm not expecting Brembo to be a better stopping brake pad. It's just a pad. Maybe it'll make a difference, but that's not the goal of this. The goal of this is just, they're already fairly new rotors. Let's go ahead and put on some new pads. And while we're in here, we'll clean up the calipers. So that's what we have here are the brake pads from Brembo. They are ceramic because I don't like dust. And we're gonna do the same thing with the rears, ceramic brake pads on the back, both Brembos. I'm not expecting Brembo to be a better stopping brake pad. It's just a pad. Maybe it'll make a difference, but that's not the goal of this. The goal of this is just, they're already fairly new rotors. Let's go ahead and put on some new pads. And while we're in here, we'll clean up the calipers. So that's, okay. I'm not gonna go over this on each particular wheel. Just know that we're gonna have to do this on all four. So the first thing we wanna do is to take off these covers that cover the pins that lock the caliper to the caliper bracket. This is part of the caliper. So the caliper bracket is this guy. And there's a pin that locks the caliper to it, and it is hidden behind right here. Here is one, and there is it's a dust cover. There's your 7mm hex on the bottom one. And like I said, there are two. And here is the second one. Just pry them off. They come right off. So since I'm going to be painting these calipers, the next thing I want to do is take some brake cleaner along with a brush and scrub off, clean off whatever it is I can prior to painting, because it'll just flake off and come off later. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to pull this clip here out. Okay, hose loose. Now let's put our H7 into here, and there are holes that we just talked about there, and one on the bottom. And let's take the caliper off. H7 in, socket in. Now all I got to do is loosen this thing up. So I don't want to strip it. Hopefully, there we go, good. The previous owner did not over tighten this thing, which is great. So to pull out the pin, because that's all there is a pin. That's your H7 right there. Anyway, to pull out the pin, all I do is I apply pressure to one side on the pin, like that. Just take a screwdriver and walk it off. So all I did, like I said, was pry on it, and it flew across that direction. So in and of itself, the caliper doesn't want to come off, just in general, because it's held on right here. So what you have to do is, what I've been doing is just pushing backwards on the caliper and the bracket, which is, and then pushing in the piston back there. And then, and only then, will the caliper come off. Okay, like I said, all I do is grab the caliper off. There is no other rocket science to it. So now I take out the brake pads. So let's do that first. Can't do it one-handed. Yeah, one of them just fell out. So they just pop in with the metal clip, and I just got to grab that one out. All right, so I want to push back in the brake pad. So let me get my tool that does that. So this is the tool I bought off Amazon. I'll put a link to it in the description below. So as you tighten down on this, you can see the caliper, the bolt is pushing out. That's pushing out here. Is the caliper. One side of this tool is going to be against the piston, and one side is going to be against the caliper. And as I tighten it down, it's going to push back up into the caliper piston back into the house. So there it is. All I'm going to do now is tighten it down with a wrench I thought I had. One-handed is not the way to go, but for the purposes of painting, I am ready. So I am not going to paint their back. That is a different color, and I feel like this side here is the only side that needs painting. I don't mind painting all of that, but that's a good definitive line that makes no difference at all when the brake, or when the car has got the tires and wheels on. So that's a good brake line. I'm gonna wipe it down with brake fluid one more time. And before I paint, I will go take all 4 calipers off so that the paint that I have can be used quickly. To remove the front caliper bracket, it takes an E20 in the position I show here. So here I started the video and I was just going right at it, but what I'm showing you here is this is the rear brakes now. And I'm getting ready to take the caliper pin covers off and getting ready to insert my H7 socket and remove the caliper pins. H7 slots right here, so let's take the caliper off. And this damn record button are gonna have it. Anyway, this was like this. All I did was wedge a screwdriver in. You can see my mark right there. And it comes right out. So here are the rear pads. much more even wear. Anyway, those are done for now. As far as painting, I don't see any reason to go beyond this because there's just zero reason at all. The only persons that will see that maybe are the people that change the tires or rotate the tires, maybe. But we're going from here forward and we're going to paint everything but all this stuff here. I might squeeze these out. These do squeeze out and you can pull them back through. Okay, for the rear, the brake caliper piston squeeze that I use for the front, very easy, doesn't work on the rear. This, if you look here, you see two holes. I have a tool here. It uses those two holes. And the purpose is the tool goes into here, pops into those two holes, and then as you tighten this down, it's pushing the piston in. It's doing the exact same thing, but we got to twist the piston. So that's what's happening. And the way I do it when I go to twist these, because what can happen is the rubber seal around the piston can twist and become bound on itself. So I take it slow. I'm in no rush. If it takes 30 minutes to get this thing twisted in like it's supposed to be, without causing damage to the boot, I'm good. Because the boot is just a rubber boot like any other rubber boot. Well, I don't want to ruin it. So let me get my tool set up and we'll walk through the process. The tool is in. All I've got to do is turn, and it's going to be difficult to hold this thing, but hopefully you can see me turning the piston in. And I'm going to do that until it stops turning and it will be fully seated. The piston will be fully seated back inside the caliper. So when it gets to a certain point, you can see it's already started to go in pretty well. When it gets to a certain point, this bolt here is going to want to turn with it, which means you're not really making any movement toward pushing the piston back into the caliper. So just hold it with a pair of channel locks and continue twisting until it finishes. So it's done. The way to back this thing out is to no longer twist on it. Once it's all the way in, you twist on this. That will loosen the tool and allow you to get it off the caliper. To remove the rear caliper bracket, it takes an E18. All right, I think the next thing to do is, still one more clean job and start prepping the paint. Here's the paint. Here is the solvent. It says to mix these two. Okay, so I've poured the reactor bottle into the can and stirred it. It says let it react for 5 minutes and then stir again, and then we can apply. Okay, it's been a few days later. Everything's painted up. Everything's nice and dry. Don't worry about the inside of the caliper. This is the part. Actually, this is the part you'll see when it's on the car. You won't even see this, but anyway, it's painted. Definitely not the back side that faces the hub. Same thing on these. Oops, they're glued to it. Painted up. I have to make a touch up there. But the part you'll see is this right here. Anyway, done. I also painted these. Not perfect. If I need to, I can replace them. Easy enough to find online. Already found them. So let's take a look at the brakes. Went ahead and painted those. Obviously, they look pretty good. Really won't tell until it gets back on the car. Also had enough paint left between the two cans to paint this part of the brakes rotors, because you'll see that part and it's already starting to look rusty, even though they're fairly new rotors. Same thing with that. And then here's this. Like I said, the line goes down the brake point. I think it'll look pretty good once it's all together. Yeah, so everything is where I need it to be. Now, the next job, the brakes are ready. The caliper pistons are pushed back in. Everything's ready to put on the new brakes. So let's start with the rear brakes. The rears, I bought this pack for the rears, and it comes with new springs, new boots, and new caps. That'll just make this area here look better than using those old pieces. So let's get these onto the caliper. Okay, what we want to do is take our rubber boot and we're going to go in through here and we're going to push it through. So it's not going to want to go. I'm going to collapse it and bend it and push it into there so it seats properly. Okay, it took some finagling with a pair of needle nose pliers, but I eventually got it pushed through and seated. So it's looking good. So next thing I want to do is get the caliper bracket in on the car. And remember, those take our E18 torque. Okay, the rotor's on, the caliper bracket is on. So one of the things to notice when you go to put the brakes on is there's an outside one without the spring. And there's an inside one with the spring. And they just sit like that. So now let's put a little grease on our guide pins just in this part here, just so it makes it easy to come out next time. And yeah, okay. So the next step after the pads are in is to put the caliper back on and tighten it down. So let's do that. One thing I always like to do is to go ahead and start my pins. Oops, down there. So they're in, ready to go. This side is done. Everything's in place. Caps are on the back. Tighten down. Put the torque specs on the screen, because I'm going to have to come back and search that up and come back and torque this. So we're going to leave this off. Side number 2 is done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take time and clean all this out, because when else do you have time to clean behind all this? It prevents rust. If you can get any kind of dirt and debris out, that's what I'm going to do. So let's clean it up. Okay, it's not new, but it's cleaner than it was. So the first thing we're going to do on the front is put back on our caliper bracket. So let's take our M20 Torx and get these back on. Caliper on, bolted in, looking good. All right, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and fit our brake pads into our caliper. And there are 2 different versions, 2 different styles. You can see the difference with the clamp or whatever that is. Anyway, the larger end goes into the round hole. The square end goes into the square end. All right, so let's get this fitted first into the round one. For this one, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. It wants to go in there, but it's going to be a pickle. So you're just going to have to take your time. It sits on top of this like that. And then just these 2 here guide in. Just pinch them and let it guide in. Okay, the pads are in. This is a bugger. I'm not gonna lie, getting that in is a problem. So let me pause this thing and go over this part of the video. I said it was tough, and I meant it. This was a colossal fight to get this brake pad into position. And the reason why is that cutout, or that leading edge around the brake pad. There's no provision for that inside the caliper. Not sure why not, but there just isn't. So what I ended up having to do is put on a channel lock that grabbed the outside of the caliper, as you see on the left side of the screen, and grab the inside of the pad in the middle and brought the 2 ends together. And it will go in there. It's just, with my strength, it did not want to do that. So that's what you're seeing here. Okay, caliper is on. Now I need to put the screws in the back and tighten this thing down and then put our cover on. So let's tighten this down first. Anyway, to put on this cover correctly, it goes, this pin here goes into there. So to give me some more room, I wedged the screwdriver in here and bent that back as best as possible. That should allow the pin to seat properly or better. Anyway, let's wedge this in and get it in. Okay, the front is done. Everything is buttoned up, cleaned up a little bit. Didn't clean up well like the backside did, but you know, wipe it down when you can. Anyway, all I got to do is the other side. So let me do that. All right, YouTubers, the last you saw me, I was finishing up this side and I was moving to the other side and I had a hiccup. So I ended up stripping out the caliper bracket thread with the caliper pin. Don't know how I did it. I didn't feel that much resistance, but it was stripped. And once I got so far into it, I could tell something was a little bit off. And when I backed it back out, I think I made things even worse. I'm thinking that the caliper pin was bent somehow going into the slot and I just didn't pick up on it. And it was too late. I tried to put in a repair kit that would re-sleeve the caliper bracket, but it too kept having a problem and I just decided to bail on it and buy new calipers. When you buy these calipers, you buy the calipers and the brackets. I bought these from O'Reilly's. They were $70 for each side, which I thought was fantastic. Included the bracket, included a new retention spring, and all I had to do was unscrew it, screw these in, bleed them, and I was off to the races. I do have a extra bottle of caliper paint that you saw in the video. I will use those later and I will paint these later. Didn't want to paint them at first in case I had a problem, and it's been 2 weeks. I don't have a problem, so now I can paint those whenever I get a chance. The rears, like you saw, went on just fine. Everything here is good to go. Looks fantastic, nice and silvery in there. Little pop of red on the brake pads, which is, I think I like that look. That looks better than having red calipers. Wasn't expecting that, but I'll take the win. That does look good against the red backdrop of the car. Yeah, so all's well that ends well. Nice and clean. So we got out of this project new brakes. We'll have these repainted at a later date, but all in all, this thing looks fantastic. YouTubers, if you like the video, like the video.